Number 1. On September 16, 1922, the bodies of Eleanor Mills and Edward Hall were discovered in a field near a farm. Both were shot in the head by a .32 pistol. The investigators noticed that Eleanor's throat was severed and that maggots were already in the wound. They had their bodies placed side by side. Edward had his calling card placed on top of him, with torn up letters that they wrote to each other placed between them. This made the investigators believe that it could have been a jealous partner that found out about their affair and took matters into their own hands. The suspects were Edward's wife, Frances, and their 2 brothers, but they were never charged for the murders. It was the location of the murders that caused the first difficulties in trying to solve the case. The farm was located in Middlesex County and Somerset County. The Middlesex County police arrived first, but it was actually the Somerset County's area. As the jurisdiction issue was being settled, curiosity seekers would contaminate the whole crime scene, even touching the evidence, such as Edward's calling card, and they also took souvenirs. 4 years later, an autopsy showed that Eleanor Mills had her tongue cut out. The only witness to the case was Jane Gibson and her son, who lived in an old barn. She was dubbed as the Pig Lady by the media because she looked after hogs. She told investigators that her dog was barking loudly at about 9 PM on the night of the murder. She went outside of her house and saw a man standing in her cornfield. She went towards him, but as she got closer she saw that there were 4 other people standing near each other. She heard gunshots and one of the figures fell to the ground, maybe dead. She said that a woman screamed, "Don't!" and that's when she turned out of fear and headed back to her house. As she was heading back to her house, she heard a woman shout, "Henry!" and then more gunshots. The case was never solved. Number 2. On Saturday, 4th of June 1960, 4 Finnish teenagers went to camp along the shore of the elegant lake Bodom. Mackie and Milo were 15 years old and were with their 18-year-old boyfriends, Seppo and Niels. At around 11 AM on June the 5th, a carpenter was out jogging near the lake when he saw the horrific scene where the 2 teenage girls and Seppo were stabbed and bludgeoned to death. The only survivor at the 4 Finnish teenagers was Niels. He suffered a concussion, fractures to the jaw and bruises to the face, but lived. He said that all he saw may be due to the concussion was red and black eyes coming towards them. A few hours earlier, 2 birdwatchers said they saw the tent collapse from a distance at about 6 AM and that they saw a blonde man leaving the tent. After the investigation, it was discovered that whoever carried out this frenzied attack never even entered the tent. The person or persons stabbed and attacked the teenagers through the sides of the tent. The weapons were never discovered. Milo was found undressed from the waist down, where she was stabbed many times even after her death. Her boyfriend Niels was found lying on top of the tent. Some of the victims' personal belongings, including their wallets and some of their clothes, were stolen by the murderer. The main suspects were Cole Valdemar, Hans Assmann and even Niels, the sole survivor of the attack. Cole was said to have hated campers and was known to have had their temper on him. He even admitted multiple times when he was drunk that he killed them. He drowned at Lake Bodom in 1969. He had an alibi, his wife, who said that he never left her side on the night of the murders. She admitted years later, though, that she was told by her husband that if she told the truth, then he would kill her. Hans Assmann, the other suspect, turned up at the hospital a day after the murders. It was said that his clothes were covered in red stains, believed to be blood, and that his fingernails were black. The hospital staff found him quite odd, saying that he appeared nervous and aggressive. He even pretended to be unconscious. The clothes that Assmann was wearing also matched the description of the man leaving the tent by the birdwatchers. He even cut off his blonde hair after news of the description of the man by the birdwatchers was on the media. The last suspect was the sole survivor. He even got arrested for the murders in 2004, 44 years after the murders took place. The investigators said that he likely committed the murders out of jealous rage, but was acquitted of all charges. Number 3. Mary Rogers' corpse was found floating in the Hudson River in New Jersey. The coroner said that her dress and her hat was torn and that her body looked as though it took a beating. She had marks on her neck, the result of strangulation. The murder of Mary received a lot of media attention at the time, where her unsolved murder was in the newspaper, such as the Herald, the Sun and Tribune. The murder of Mary Rogers became a local obsession. One of the main suspects to the murder was Mary's fiancé, Daniel Payne. It was said that he was disliked by Mary's mother and that Mary agreed not to marry him. 2.5 months later, Mary was found dead. Daniel took poison and committed suicide not far from where she died. He left a suicide note that read, "To the world, here I am on the very spot. May God forgive me for my misspent life." Do you believe that this note confirmed that Daniel was the killer and couldn't live with the guilt? Or was he a man that was totally torn apart, that he could no longer live without his love, Mary Rogers, and committed suicide? Another theory was that Mary's death was a result of gang violence. Mrs. Frederica Loss ran a tavern called Nick Moore's house, not far from where the body was found. She remembered that a young woman had come in with a man on July 25th. They dined at the tavern and left. Later in the evening, Mrs. Loss said she heard a scream outside. About a year later, Mrs. Loss was shot accidentally by her son and died. On her deathbed, she confessed that Mary came to her tavern with a tall and dark doctor who performed an abortion on her. Mary had died of complications and Mrs. Loss' son had taken her body to the river. The case was never solved. There was no evidence to suggest that a deathbed confession was actually true. Number 4. Over 30 years ago, Sweden was left in a state of shock when their Prime Minister, Olof Palme, was assassinated. On 28 February 1986, Olof was walking home with his wife after going to the cinema. He didn't have no bodyguards with him. A man who was later identified by Olof's wife as Krista Peterson was said to have came up behind them, where he then shot and killed Olof Palme with a gunshot wound to the back. Olof's wife was also shot. The bullet grazed her back and she survived. 2 women that were in a car close to the scene of the attack tried to help Olof, where he was rushed to the hospital. Krista Peterson was arrested and convicted for Palme's murder. Peterson's conviction was later overturned on appeal. There were other suspects though. Due to Olof's political left-wing views, they made him a few enemies. Some suggested it could have been rogue Swedish spies as well as South African agents. One of these enemies was said to have been Bertil Whedon, a man linked to South African security services. He was said to have organised the killing, something he has always denied. The police confirmed that he's not a suspect. An associate of Bertil Whedon was Alf Annerstrom. Alf was a doctor and an implacable right-wing opponent of Palme, who spent time in a mental hospital after shooting a policewoman. He was investigated closely by police, but always maintained that at the time of the killing, he was at home with his then partner, an account she backed up. Well, in 2014, his then partner said she was scared and lied about his alibi, and that he was violent. She then said that on the night Olof was murdered, Alf left the flat telling his partner they had to put money in the parking meter, something she found quite odd because it was free parking on Fridays and weekends. Hopefully the case will one day be solved. Number 5. Not so long ago, we did the unsolved case of Tupac Shakur. Well, now by popular demand, we'll be talking about Biggie Smalls' unsolved murder. On March 9th, Biggie Smalls, whose real name, Christopher Wallace, was attending the Soul Train Awards after party. Biggie left the party with Puff Daddy in a separate car behind them. Biggie Smalls' car then stopped at a traffic light, where a black Chevy Impala drove beside his car and then opened fire, hitting Biggie Smalls 4 times. Witnesses said that the shooter was a black male with a blue suit and black bow tie. Just like Tupac's case, suspicions were raised about the police. It was said that it took about a month for the homicide division to touch the case. Considering the high profile of the case, this was extra strange. The theories are said to have been a revenge attack after the Tupac killing. Some believe that Biggie Smalls and Puff Daddy ordered the Tupac killing and that this was revenge for that killing. Now Suge Knight was the owner to the record label that Tupac was signed to. One of the cops that did some work for Suge Knight was David Mack. David Mack drove a black Impala and was said to have been there on the night of the murder of Biggie Smalls. David Mack was later arrested and was sentenced to 14 years in prison in 1997 for robbing a bank of $722,000. Another suspect was Amir Mohammed. He knew Mack from college and he matches the description of what the witnesses said the shooter looked like. The case is still unsolved. Who do you believe killed Biggie Smalls? Hope you enjoy mysterious videos such as this, and if you do, then please give it a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.